I'm the Philosophical Bachelor, and today I'm going to talk about Charles Sanders Peirce's fourth article for the Monist on his Metaphysics, published in October 1892, entitled Man's Glassy Essence. What does Peirce mean by the essence of human beings as glassy? The term surfaces in William Shakespeare's play Measure for Measure to refer to the fragility of the material of glass. For Shakespeare, human essence is likewise fragile, where our self-understanding of what we are can easily be shattered or changed. However, it can also refer to the transparency of glass, where our essence is not something that is simply within us, what we have been born or created with, but instead comes from outside us. The way the outside world seen through a pane of glass is not the image of the glass itself, but of the outside world. As we proceed through Peirce's essay, we shall see what he means and what his meaning for our essence implies. In the previous three essays, he introduced two concepts that are the foundation of his metaphysics: Tycheism and Synechism, or chance and continuity. The aim of his fourth essay is to clarify the relation between the psychical and physical aspects of a substance. This relation harks back to René Descartes' mind-body dualism, where there is the physical substance of the body, and then there is the immaterial substance of mind. The human being possesses both, but yet how two substances that are completely different can communicate has become known as the mind-body problem. Peirce is taking a shot at answering this, and his answer is pretty radical. He gets down to the nuts and bolts of things, what things are fundamentally made of, which are atoms and molecules, and in living things, cells which are composed of protoplasm. Protoplasm, according to Oxford Languages Dictionary, is the colourless material comprising the living part of a cell. Peirce spends a substantial portion of this essay on the former, essentially on the kinetic theory of matter, but it is technical, perhaps more suited for scientists, which he is one. However, I think if the editors of the Monist journal were stricter, they would have asked him to chop it out. I shall skip over it, but the little we need to take from it will come through anyway in the rest of his essay. However, a quick refresher on what the kinetic theory of matter is can be helpful. Matter is comprised of moving particles or molecules, and the speed of these molecules will determine the kinetic energy of the matter, which is proportional to the temperature of the matter. Let's now look at his interesting observations on protoplasm. The slime exists as a solid or liquid. However, unlike a familiar substance such as water, where the change of state is due to the arrangement of the molecules, where water molecules become less free to move in its solid versus its liquid phase, in protoplasm the phase change is due to a chemical change, where its molecules break down. Solid protoplasm does not melt. Before it can melt from the heat applied, it will chemically break down to new smaller molecules. Protoplasm cannot tolerate extreme heat or cold, with all its activities in the living organism taking place in a tight range around the temperature of phase change, leading to its extreme instability. There is protoplasm in all organic cells, but they differ between species and between cells in a single organism. For instance, human beings have nerve cells and muscle cells, and accordingly, nerve protoplasm and muscle protoplasm. The phase change in protoplasm is not just from heating and cooling, but also when they are disturbed in other ways, and can also happen spontaneously in the absence of external disturbances. Observed through a microscope, a mona, which is a living organism that is only made up of protoplasm, can exhibit liquid flows within its otherwise solid protoplasm, where the liquid flows under the influence of gravity. This liquefaction begins at the position in which the mona is disturbed and spreads. When the disturbance is removed, the liquefaction stops accordingly and the protoplasm reverts to its solid state. Frequent stimuli can cause it to be more resistant to liquefaction in a kind of fatigue. Its shape may also change from stimuli and revert when the stimuli is removed. Protoplasm grows when it assimilates food, but the type of new protoplasm that forms is influenced by the already present protoplasm, so that nerve protoplasm grows new nerve protoplasm and muscle protoplasm grows new muscle protoplasm. Peirce observes that growth as well as decline of the protoplasm only happens in its liquid state. It can also reproduce, forming a separate organism. The next two characteristics are the one Peirce is really interested in. Firstly, how protoplasm can take on habits. Liquid protoplasm flows and the stream of its flows tend to follow the same course, though this is only probable and not necessitated. Secondly, how protoplasm feels. Peirce proposes that it not only feels but exercises all the functions of mind. The question for him is not so much to prove that protoplasm has mind, but what is it in its molecular structure that gives it consciousness? Is it the complicated molecular structure which is composed of thousands of atoms? Because large molecules are unstable, is it the many ways the molecule can break down when disturbed or heated? On habits, when one of the protoplasm's molecules is disturbed, it breaks down into smaller molecules which sets off a chain reaction as they collide with other molecules, causing them to also break down. These processes require energy and hence the temperature of the substance gets lowered. According to the kinetic theory of matter, because energy is lost to the chemical decomposition of the molecules, the now greater number of smaller molecules also moves slower, leading to a drop in their kinetic energy and hence the temperature of the protoplasm. The smaller molecules, because they are slower moving, can then have the opportunity to reform back to the larger molecules and return to its solid equilibrium if the disturbance is removed. It is only when the protoplasm is liquid that it can assimilate food. The food has to be chemically similar with the submolecules to be able to unite with them to form new molecules and add to the protoplasm's mass. It also has to be oriented correctly at the right speed with the right direction and be at the correct spot at the right time to be assimilated. Otherwise, it will be thrown off. As with the liquid flows, Peirce sees the way the protoplasm absorbs its food as a kind of primordial habit-taking tendency, where the movement of the food molecules has to correspond to the movement of the protoplasm submolecules in a certain way to be assimilated. On feeling or mind in the protoplasm, Peirce follows the intuition that if we are able to replicate the molecular structure of protoplasm in a laboratory, we will get real protoplasm which will exhibit all the characteristics of organic protoplasm, including its living or feeling and mental characteristics. Unless we are to accept a weak dualism, the property of feeling must be shown to arise from some peculiarity of the mechanical system, he writes. Either we accept that there are two levels of reality as expressed by the Cartesian dualism where mind and body are separate substances, or if not, we should try to find out how from a mechanical arrangement of atoms can come forth life. Peirce rejects dualism and so he has to do the latter. However, he thinks that to try to understand how mind can come about through the laws of mechanics will not work unless we admit that physical events are but degraded or undeveloped forms of psychical events. In other words, he believes that there is a mental basis to physical things, so his solution is that all physical objects have mind, a kind of idealism that considers mind as fundamental, a position he has already put forward in his first Monist paper. He has already shown that habits develop in protoplasm, and he will now attempt to show how such habits lead to feelings, which is characteristic of mind. As already noted, when the disturbance is removed from the protoplasm's reaction also stops. In fact, a goal of the reactions is to remove the disturbance. For instance, if heat is introduced to the protoplasm, it breaks down, which is an endothermic reaction which takes away the heat. This stimuli, reaction, removal of stimuli sequence, when repeated, can be seen as a habit. However, if the stimuli is not successfully removed, the protoplasm's excitations continue and may even intensify, leading to a non-habitual reaction which weakens the habit. Peirce has explained that matter does not obey its ideal laws with absolute precision in the first two papers on Tycheism. This means that there are small departures from the regularity of the laws of nature. Because protoplasm is sensitive to disturbances, that is, it is unstable, small disturbances can lead to large reactions or the breaking of habits. Hence, simply from a cause of small chance occurrences, protoplasm can have large effects that depart from the expected habits. This is observed in nerve protoplasm where small stimuli can result in large reactions. He suggests that such departures from habit and spontaneous reactions are accompanied by an intensification of feeling, in accordance to the law of mind he has put forward in his third Monist paper entitled The Law of Mind. This law of mind states that ideas tend to spread continuously and to affect certain others which stand to them in a peculiar relation of affectability. In this spreading, they lose intensity and especially the power of affecting others, but gain generality and become welded with other ideas. He suggests that a mechanical theory of life is not contrary to his idealist perspective. It is merely that the mechanical theory has not been sufficiently developed to include the element of chance. He writes, "Chance is but the outward aspect of that which within itself is feeling." We see chance happening when the actions of things do not correspond to the laws of mechanics, resulting in a diversity of outcomes, but the object is struggling to return to its habit, which is the feeling he is referring to. Wherever actions take place under an established uniformity, there so much feeling as there may be takes the mode of a sense of reaction, he adds. He links here habits and feelings, or the physical to the psychical. He suggests that outwardly, things including non-living things appear as matter, but viewing it from the inside, looking at its immediate character as feeling, it appears as consciousness. He has explained in the first Monist paper of how from chaos emerge some biases which become entrenched as habits to become a regularity or a law of nature. He extends it here. Mechanical laws are nothing but acquired habits, like all the regularities of mind, including the tendency to take habits itself, and that this action of habit is nothing but generalization, and generalization is nothing but the spreading of feelings. Let us first understand the analogy. We will readily admit that non-living things more or less obey the mechanical laws of nature. Living things more or less obey their habits. How the mechanical laws which direct physical things came about were from chance biases that become increasingly entrenched to finally seem regular and law-like. How habits in living things come about is an idea of feeling affecting other ideas of feelings and becoming generalized in accordance to his law of mind. However, Peirce does not merely consider the parallels as analogous, but thinks that the process is the same in both non-living and living things, where non-living things have feelings or ideas and habits also, albeit in a degraded or undeveloped way. Wherever chance motions have general characters, there is a tendency for this generality to spread and to perfect itself. In that case, a general idea is a certain modification of consciousness which accompanies any regularity or general relation between chance actions, he adds. Where chance develops a bias into a habit and then a generalized behavior, Peirce sees mentality. He thinks that a general idea has a unity not unlike the unity of the ego in a conscious being. In fact, he thinks a person is only a particular kind of general idea, and every general idea has the unified living feeling of a person. He proposes an empirical test for his theory of how general ideas develop, to test if indeed a feeling in close connection to another can affect the other. If his hypothesis is right, a group of individuals in close communion with one another will develop a group consciousness. His evidence is how esprit de corps, national sentiment, sympathy are no mere metaphors. Today we have the notion of a hive mind when referring to colonies of bees or ants. Peirce also refers to the minds of corporations. Just like an individual worker in a corporation may not know what the entire corporation is thinking, a brain cell does not know what our entire brain is thinking. Yet the individual worker clearly has his own mind. The larger entity also has an influence on the individual, as how national sentiments or the corporate culture of his workplace may affect the individual's self-identity. Another key example of groups influencing individuals are the religious organizations they belong to. My assessment of his success in linking the psychical to the physical is that while he tries to examine the phenomena of the living protoplasm to how it develops habit, the leap from habit to feeling is left unexplained. That a thing has a feeling to want to return to equilibrium can be accused of an unwarranted anthropomorphism. While he discusses how the group has an effect on the essence of its constituents, hence man's glassy essence, he did not elaborate on how the constituent affects the group and even seems to suggest that it does not. As for whether his biology of the protoplasm accords with today's scientific consensus, I do not know, though it is not critical to the metaphysical points he is making. Peirce has chosen a specific biological substance, the protoplasm, to demonstrate his two metaphysical concepts of chance and continuity, using it to explain how habit can form out of chance, after which he links habits to feelings, which is a characteristic of a consciousness or a mind. The main takeaway is that everything has mind, from atoms to cells to individual living things to groups such as teams, corporations, nations, and organizations. For Peirce, mind is universal. Thank you for listening to the Philosophical Bachelor.